Hello again, good morning, or at least it is in the UK. I always say that. Um, Today, I wanted to talk to you about healing abilities. Um, Certainly something that I've got, and I've come across other people who've got it as well. And it makes me wonder whether we've all got it to some degree, but it's just that most people don't use it or aren't aware that they've got these kind of abilities. I knew about it from being a child. Even when I was a child, I knew that I could just heal people. I just instinctively knew it. And the main thing that I found was that I could heal pets, animals, particularly dogs. I've always loved dogs, and dogs have always loved me, even from being a small child. Dogs would make their way to me and kind of present themselves if they've got a problem. I noticed this when I was a very, very young child. If there was a dog that wasn't feeling too good, it would look at me and make its way towards me. And it's still the same today. I can see a dog that's never seen me before, a total stranger. And when it sees me, if it's got any kind of problem, or even if it hasn't, there's something about me that they trust. And the way I look at it is that they can actually see some kind of aura about around each of us. That we as people, as human beings, have an aura around us. Now, we can't see it because we've lost that ability. But I'm quite sure that animals can see it. And the reason I say this is that the dog or an animal will see me from quite some distance away and come towards me, particularly if it's not well or if it's in pain. And I've seen it with horses as well, where a horse that doesn't normally go close to anybody because it doesn't trust them will quite happily come to me and come real up close and let me stroke it and whatever. Now, when I come across a dog, quite often I've noticed a phenomena when I'm walking along, say, going to the park or something. There's lots of people coming the other way with their dogs. And there'll be maybe two or three, four people in front of me at various distances, just they're walking along as well. And a dog will come towards me with its owner. They've either just been to the park or they're just going to the park or whatever. And the dog will completely ignore the other people. There might be three or four people walking individually in front of me, and they'll go past one, ignore them, go past another, ignore them. Not even look at them, hardly look at them, basically, until it comes to me. And when it sees me at a distance, it starts to focus on me, as if it's seen something that people can't see. And when it gets near to me, the dog will straight away come across to me without me saying anything. In other words, I'm just walking past as the other people did. But for some reason, the dog will see something in me that it didn't see in other people. And it'll immediately come towards me, get very, very friendly. And, the owner will be apologising for their dog jumping up at me. And I'll say, oh, don't worry about it. I love dogs, blah, blah, blah. You get into a conversation with them. And if the dog's got a pain of some description, there's a definite pattern to what they do next. They'll, what I call, present themselves. They'll come very close to me, often leaning against me, and they'll lean in such a way that the part of their body that's hurting them is closest to me. For example, if the dog's got a problem with its back legs and its hips, it will turn round and almost back into me, as if presenting itself for healing. The dogs obviously realise there's something in my aura or whatever. They realise that I'm a healer. Now, people don't often believe this. Some people don't believe in healing like this. A lot of people do, actually. But the dogs know this for sure. Right? They see me and straight away, without any hesitation whatsoever, they know that I can help them if they're in pain or if they're not feeling good or they've got some kind of illness or whatever. And like I said, what they'll do is they'll back into me if it's the hips. If it's somewhere around the front, they'll come frontwise at me and literally lean against me, and as if presenting themselves for healing. quite often I'll get into a conversation that with the owner that, oh, he's not too well, is he? And quite often they'll say, oh, how do you know that? I say, well, I'm a healer and I can sense things, you know. And then you'll usually, the tale always goes the same. The owner will then tell you that they've had the dog to every vet in town. They've all told them a different story. They've given loads and loads of expensive treatments, none of which have worked. And you get this tale of woe, basically. Now, at that point, I say to them, do you mind if I just do a healing on it? I just touch the dog. I don't do anything. I don't tap tugging at it or pulling it or anything like that. I just lay my hands on it. And I've never had anybody refuse that offer. And they'll say, well, I'll try anything because we're desperate, you know. And sometimes I can tell that there's a problem because the dog's limping very badly or doesn't look very mobile at all and looks generally very unhappy because it's in pain. Sometimes there's no sign that the dog's got any problem. It seems to be walking properly and stuff like that. But either way, once I've got the owner's sort of permission to do it, I always warn the owner. I says, look, when I do this, the dog might go into a trance and they kind of drop to the floor, but don't worry about it. It's just a thing, you know. It's very temporary and they'll get straight back up again. Oh, okay, yeah, no problem. And the way I do it is the dog will then present itself to me and I'll put my hand on the forehead of the dog because obviously that's the brain, which is the central part of the nervous system. I'll then run my hand up and down the dog, up along its back and stuff like that, and then down its legs and whatever. And I can always feel where the problem is. And the reason I can feel that is I get a hot spot. When my left hand passes over the affected area, I get a hot spot, very, very hot. It's almost like putting your hand against to a fire. It's not just a marginal thing, it's very, very hot. I can feel it. And I know that that's where it is. And quite often, the owner might not have said anything other than generally what's wrong. Oh, he's limping. Sometimes that's obvious. But they haven't told me what the vets have said. For vets, in Britain, that's a veterinary surgeon, for you Americans or anybody else. It's not ex-military people like you say, vets. It's when we talk about vets, we mean veterinarians. Anyway, they've not told me the specifics anyway of what the vets have said. And I'll put my hand over and they'll say, oh yeah, sometimes they'll come out and say, oh yeah, he's got a problem with his, the vets have told me he's got a problem with his shoulder in the joint. And I'll go across his spine and say, no, it's not. He's got a problem with his spine. And they'll go, oh, well, they've done x-rays and they've done this and they've done that. I said, well, it's in his spine. It's not his joint or whatever it is they've told me. So what I then do is I'll do a healing on them, which lasts sometimes about 30 seconds, a minute, 2 minutes. And all I do is concentrate on that area. And I don't actually have to think anything, but I just think about healing the dog. But I think what it is just the fact that my hand is in proximity to the affected area. And like I say, quite often the dog will start from a standing position. And once I put my hand on its forehead like so, it'll then flop to the ground, just lie down, like as if it's in a trance. And that's why I always notify the person who's with it, the owner, that they'll do that and it's nothing to worry about. And by this time, the dog is quite often laying on the ground, almost like in a trance, like I say. I run my hands over, find the area that's affected, and then concentrate. And then that's enough. I quite often will see the same dog, the same owner, a week or two in the future, you know, a few days later, whatever. And it brings to mind what happens. A situation I had with a dog. It was funny enough. He was exactly like my dog, a golden Labrador. And this poor old chap was in a right old state. He was on the playing field near to where I live, and with his owner. And the poor old thing could hardly walk. He was clearly in a lot of pain. And I went to this lady and I got talking. I went through the thing as I've just described. And I got the story. She'd been to all the vets and she'd paid over £3,000 in vet fees, all of which were useless. And the worrying thing is that every time she took it to a different vet, she got a different story. They were telling her it was this, it was that, it was whatever. Anyway, I did a sort of the healing on him. I said he's got a trapped nerve in his spine. And it could be a disc problem that's pressing on the nerve. And that's why he can hardly walk. And I just did a healing on him. Lasted about 2 minutes. That was quite a long one actually, because he'd got quite a deep set problem. And it'd been like, she told me it'd been like this for well over a year, about 18 months. He'd been hobbling around, could hardly walk, poor thing. Anyway, I saw her about 10 days later. And I went to her. At first, I didn't recognise her because, oddly enough, when I'm out, I recognise dogs before I recognise people, oddly enough. And I didn't recognise this dog because the dog was running about like a good one. He wasn't actually that old, this dog. She told me he was only about 6, which, is middle-aged for a Labrador. But anyway, 10 days later, there I am on the field and playing fields. And there he is running about like a good one. And this woman saw me. She says, she swore at first because she was so happy. She says, I don't know what you've done to my dog. I says, wow, what's up? She says, what's up? She says, he's brilliant. She says, next day, when I saw you, she said, you did that healing on him. She says, he got up as if there was nothing wrong with him. And she says, I can't believe what's happened. She said, I've been like 18 months or whatever it was. I've spent all this money and all this stuff and they've told me all this. She says, and you've just treated him like this. I said, oh, I'm just glad I can help him, And that's fairly typical. I'll quite often do a healing and then see the dog a few days later or even a couple of weeks later or something like that because they all go to the same park, as a routine. So you tend to bump into the same dogs all the time. And the dogs are always a lot better, which is interesting to say the least. Because the reason it's important with dogs is, if you did it to a human being, people would say, well, it's psychosomatic. You see, they weren't really ill to start with, and you allegedly just healing them as it's a psychological thing. Well, of course, with a dog, it can't be psychological, can it? So that rules out that. And these dogs are not just being ill for a couple of days. Some of them, like I say, have been ill for a couple of years. And yet, lo and behold, bang, within a few minutes sometimes, certainly within hours, certainly the next day, the dog appears to be completely and utterly cured. Now, interestingly, I don't often do this to people, and I'll tell you for why. I only do this if I'm asked. Now, for some reason, there's a protocol attached to having this particular, if you like, gift. One is you never make money out of it. So if people offer me money, I always refuse. It's given out of love and it's given freely. That's why I was given this ability. And with people, I wait until they ask me. I had an example the other week in front of a lot of witnesses, about 6 or 7, 8 people there. There was a lady who was at this place where I was. And she came in and she was walking around very stiff like this. It was obviously got a neck problem, a severe neck problem. And she was a good old stick and she was quite forthright, shall we say, in a description of what the problem was and what the treatment had been by the doctors. Suffice to say, in amongst all the swearing, she was not exactly satisfied with the treatment she'd had, let's put it that way. But she was very vocal about this, and to be honest, the language she used would have made a sailor blush. But I thought it was quite funny, actually. But she was doing it in a nice way. She wasn't being nasty or anything. She was just laughing and joking, really. But she told me they just put her on this most powerful painkiller that they could. The doctor had told her, I can't give you anything else in tablet form. The next thing is to start giving you injections like morphine and stuff like this. Well, that's a route you don't want to go down, let me tell you. But she told me that she got this particular painkiller, which I recognise, and I know what it is. And it is a very, very powerful painkiller. And it's what one they give anybody. I mean, this is only for the most severe cases that a doctor will give you this when they've tried everything else. Because with this particular painkiller, as I understand it, there are a lot of side effects, which are quite unpleasant. Anyway, I said to this lady, I says, do you want to get rid of this pain? And she says, I'll do anything. Honestly, she says, she was using a few expletives again. I would do anything to get rid of this pain. And I said, well, would you let me heal you? Because I'm a healer. And she says, yes, please do try. I said, don't worry, I don't have to actually touch you. I only have to put my hand above your head there. And then I says, I will just look into your eyes. And I said, just look at me. And she looked at me. And I just said to her, feel that pain coming down and down and down and down and down and down and down. It's gone. That's all I did. And this woman started going, what have you done? What have you done? She was absolutely amazed, this woman. I said, just be calm with it, be gentle. Don't start doing anything strenuous because you felt the pain go. You need time to heal. And she says, this is amazing. She said, all the pain's just gone. She said, this is the first time I've been like that. I've been pain-free for 6 months. She said, I've been like this. And she was, by now the swearing had stopped a little bit, had ceased. And she's going, that's amazing. And there was literally, like I say, 6 or 8 people watching this. And they were amazed at this woman. And I said to her, listen, just sit down for a moment. So we sat her down. I said, I want to explain something to you. I said, I've healed you now of the pain and everything. But I want you to go home and be very, very careful. Don't start lifting things up. Don't start moving around too much. Give your body time to heal. And then tomorrow, and I said to her again, I said to her, look at me. I said, tomorrow morning, after you'll have a good night's sleep. And then tomorrow, that illness that you've had will have gone completely. So she said, okay, yeah, because she was, she got some heavy things to take home with her. And we got somebody to take it for her so she didn't have to carry it. Anyway, I saw her about 2 weeks later. And she came running up to me, I mean, literally running. And she says, I can't believe what you did. She says, I've had no trouble. I did what you said. I went home, rested. And I got up the following day, nothing. She says, do you know, she says, it's the first night's sleep, a proper night's sleep I've had for 2 years. She says, because I can't sleep. Because as soon as I lay down, I'm in pain, of course, all the time. I was, and I can't sleep. She said, that first night's sleep I've had for 2 years. And she said, I got up the following day, and just like you said, all the pain had gone. And she said, I've been back to the doctors and told him. And he says, well, if it's gone, for whatever reason, he said, just be careful. Don't go lifting any heavy objects or doing anything too strenuous. Let it rest and whatever. But he says, she stopped taking the painkillers because she didn't need them. And yeah, she's fine. Now, as I say, I've never taken money for this, nor will I ever take money for this. And I only do it if people ask me. I do it for dogs because obviously dogs are asking me by the fact they come up to me and present themselves for healing. That's their way of asking. It's not something I walk around preaching. I don't have meetings or anything like that where, people have to give me money. Have you seen those sort of things? Where people, they'll often wrap it up in religious stuff, and people will come along in wheelchairs and people who are sick and on crutches and all the rest of it. And these people will claim that they can cure them. And of course, there's always money involved, isn't there? They always ask for a collection, or they have to pay to get in, or they have to pay to be seen. Now, I'll let you into a little secret. Right? If these people had any ability whatever, they would know the same as what I know, which is this ability has been given to you for the benefit of everybody, to give it with love. It's not to make money for yourself. So as soon as I see somebody asking for money to do a healing, psychic healing or whatever it is, religious healing or whatever it is, the word fake comes to my mind, because I know that that's not the way it works. Not in my case anyway. Perhaps these people are different. Perhaps they do get results. I don't know. It's not for me to say. But put it this way, it's not something I'd ever do. And in fact, I've been offered money. And I've been talking to people and they've said, oh, I had one case of somebody I was talking to, and his mum was in a similar situation. He got a load of pain and stuff like that. And he offered me, he says, will you come round, I'll pay you. I said, no, I'll come round, but you're not paying me. I told him why. Went round to see his mum, did a healing on her. And she was completely cured within a couple of days. And I often say to people often ask me, well, how does this work? I said, well, it's a bit like having a car with a flat battery. The car itself won't start. It's got a problem. But there's nothing wrong with the engine. And all it requires is another car to come up with another battery, put your jump leads on, give it a bit of a boost, and once it starts charging itself, you don't need the other car. It's like giving them a quick boost. And then once they're back to normal again, and the car's running, its engine's running again, it's charging itself up, the battery will charge up again, and then you don't need that other car. That's the way it works. It's a simplistic way of looking at it, but it gives it a sort of rough estimate of what the situation is. Now, I've also noticed this in terms of people's lives. That from time to time I meet up with people that maybe I haven't seen for a long time, or somebody comes into my life and they've not been having a very good time with things. And the funny thing is, when they often tell me all the troubles. People do this all the time with me. I think they instinctively know that I'm somebody who they can talk to and they will listen to them, because most people won't. Most people aren't interested in anybody else's troubles. And if you attempt to tell them your troubles, within 2 minutes they're telling you theirs. And all of a sudden the conversation isn't about you anymore with your problems, it's about them. Very few people will sit and actually listen to you, and very few people will sit and then go and help you in a practical way or an emotional way to give you support. Sooner or later it will be about them. And I've noticed this quite often. I'll meet people or meet up with them again after a while. I've not seen them for a bit, and they recount basically their life is crap. Right? They've got themselves into all sorts of problems. You get the tale of woe. And I'll listen to this, and then I'll talk it through with them, and quite often I'll help them. It's not uncommon for me to give people money. Sometimes it might be a loan. Sometimes it might be just a gift or a combination thereof. Sometimes I'll loan people money, then they can't afford to pay it back, and I just turn around and say, don't worry about it. Luckily, I always seem to have a lot of money without even trying. And I sometimes wonder if you believe in God, or if you believe in the power of the universe, whatever your spiritual beliefs are. I sometimes wonder if if life gives you money, to see what you're going to do with it. Are you going to spend it on yourself, or are you going to go out in the world and say, out of love for other people, give them money, lend them money? More importantly, give them your love by listening to them, what their problems are, and trying to help them get through them. Not always easy though, because some people don't want to face up to their problems. Most people don't. They want to tell you about them, but when you say to them, well, why don't you try this and why don't you try that? Quite often they'll just go back into this cycle where they can't seem to break out of, and they've got fixed ideas about things and whatever, and they won't listen. What I've noticed, every time I get involved with somebody like that, their life before they met me has been a tale of woe, one problem after another, and they often get what I call repetitive problems. For instance, you quite often get this with women. They'll have been in women more so than men probably. They'll have been in one sort of relationship that hasn't worked out after another. Not necessarily abusive, but just don't seem to work out. And they're mystified by this and all the rest of it. And they'll have got themselves into all sorts of difficulties and problems. And quite often while I'm with them, their life then stabilises and becomes a lot better. Things get sorted out. I give them practical help, sometimes financial help, sometimes just listening to people, talking to them. And things start to pick up. Great. And then what happens is they drift off. They'll drift away and do other things. So they've had this life. So then I'll find out later through the grapevine or whatever. I'll bump into them again. They'll tell me all about it again. That as soon as I've left their life, or they've left me, which is more to the point, their life went back into its old cycle again. They've been very negative. So before they knew me, negative, negative, negative. When they knew me, suddenly gets positive, picks back up again, stays positive until they drift away, and then within no time it's back to the negative cycle again. And it's amazing how many times that happens to me. Absolutely amazing. And I think sometimes the universe, God, call it what you want, depending on your spiritual aspect, perhaps I'm sent to them as a sort of, almost like a guardian to try and help them. But unfortunately, human beings, what they are, quite often won't listen. You're there giving them good advice without any strings attached. Like I say, often lend them money, often give them money. Certainly give them a lot of your time and help them and whatever. But they don't sit there and think, actually, he's a good guy and he's, whatever reason he's suddenly come into my life, perhaps I ought to listen to him. No. Because what you tend to find is the thing that they listen to most is their own ego. And that's what got them in trouble in the first place. You can't help people. You can only help them to help themselves. And quite often as well, my being friends with them is quite draining for me. People like that. Because they're sort of getting, if you like, my jump leads are attached to their psyche, and they're draining my life energy to prop up their life. But because they're not listening, immediately I'm sort of disconnected from them. Their psychic battery, their human energy, their battery goes flat again, and they end up with the same problems. I know it's a clumsy analogy, but that's the nearest one I can get. And it's amazing how many times I get that in my life. And at one time I used to get worried about people coming in and out of my life and why is this happening? I get very friendly with people, and then all of a sudden they drift off for some reason, they disappear and you don't see them again and blah, blah, blah. And I've now reconciled the fact that that's my role in life, if you like. And I come along, try and help people, and then they drift away, and they probably start listening to their ego again rather than listening. And I've had situations where I've been in proximity to people for a long time, and I've had them actually say to me face, how come you know what's going to happen in the future? And I tell them, because I'm not like most people. I've got certain abilities. And it's quite obvious that you know that because you've seen it that many times. You can't explain it away. And I've had people say to me, well, how come you know what's going to happen? You always know what's going to happen. I say, yeah, because basically I can remember the future. So when a situation's developing, I can see straight away how it's going to turn out. Of course, the question is, and I've asked this question to people who have done this to me, given that you know that my judgment is extremely good and my perception of what's going to happen in the future is incredibly accurate, and yet you still argue with me, you accept that I seem to have this ability to know what's going to happen and predict things. And yet when I give you advice, you ignore it. Weird, isn't it? It's like having one of these tipsters who tells you which horse is going to win horse races. I say there was a guy there and he was giving you all these good tips all the time, but it wasn't the horse that you were going to back. But you see this guy, he keeps giving these tips and they all come in and win, right? And you've seen perhaps 10 times, 20 times, over and over and over again, this guy's giving you the winner each time without fail. But that person who's putting the bets on keeps ignoring them and going to the bookies and putting a different horse, and it loses. And the horse that I'd told him to bet on wins. Now, if that happened to you in real life, you would be a pretty stupid person, wouldn't you, to carry on doing that? But the only thing that's making you do that is your own ego. The failure to accept that somebody else is telling you something which is accurate and the best thing to do. In other words, a good tip in the horse racing parlance. But because it's not your idea, you thought, if he's telling you number 5 is going to win, and it does win, you thought that number 3 was going to win. And what's telling you to put your money on number 3 is your own ego. Even though your logical mind is telling you, well, hang on a minute, this guy's been right time after time after time with his tips. Every one of the horses that he's told me before will win, they have won. So logically, intellectually, that you need to listen to him and follow what he's telling you, because then you'll win. But no. When you go into the bookies, at some point, your ego is shouting louder. Ego shouts louder than logic. That's a little saying that I have. And it's true. People's egos are what shouts the loudest to them. And this is why they end up in the same problems, repeat themselves and over and over and over and over again through their lives. Because the consistent factor in their life is their own ego. People come and go, people drift in and out, they have new relationships, new friendships, new jobs, whatever it might be that is causing them a problem, or a multiple of all those things. Those things are variables. The only consistent thing is their own ego, and it's that that's tripping them up. But unfortunately, when you explain this to them, they won't listen. Why? Because their ego is in control, not their intellect or their faith or their belief in spirituality or the power of the universe or whatever it may be that you need to believe in. Quite often, if you look at it, religions, for instance, religious doctrine is usually about, you get a decision to make. Shall I do this or shall I do that? Your ego is telling you to do one thing. Your religious doctrine, your faith, is telling you to do something entirely different. Example, somebody collapses in the street in front of you. What do? Do you go and help them? Or do you walk past and let other people attend to it? Now your ego is saying, well, why should you help them? There's nothing in it for you. Carry on walking. You're already late for your appointment. Keep walking. Whereas your spiritual side, which is often based in your faith or your belief system of some description, is saying, no, go and help that person. That's a human being in trouble. Go and help them. And unfortunately, a lot of people listen to their ego. They don't listen to their faith, what the universe is telling them, what life is telling them, what their spirituality is telling them, whatever belief system they may or may not have is telling them. They listen to their ego. And then the same outcomes happen. How many people do you know who have had umpteen relationships and they've all broken up? None of them have ended up well. And yet they're telling you that of these umpteen people that they've had relationships with, it's always the other person's fault. Every single time. Well, hang on a minute. You must be picking the wrong people then. Why are you picking the wrong people? That's one explanation. The second explanation is it's not the other people at all, it's you. You're the problem because you're the common denominator. You know, in these umpteen relationships that you've had, one after another, and they've all turned out bad. What you say is bad. And when you're talking to people like this, they'll go through a whole diatribe, basically slagging off everybody they've ever been in a relationship with, without fail. There's no exceptions, because none of these relationships have worked out. And, you know, particularly in the case of women nowadays, this can be like a lot. I mean, it staggers me sometimes when I talk to people. You know, a long list of people they've had problems with. And you know that the next time they get in a relationship, exactly the same thing is going to happen again. Why? Because their ego's talking to them. When they make choices about people, they don't look for somebody who's nice, who's kind, generous with their time. They'll tend to look for the guy who's got the big car, big bank account, and stuff like that. Now, what makes them do that? It's their ego. Because they want to be associated with that person because of the social status it will give them. It's ego. And, you know, if you choose people on that basis, don't be surprised if it doesn't go terribly well. You know, but, you know, they may well meet lots of people in their life who are nice people, kind, generous, do anything for them, not interested in them. No, not interested. So why have all your relationships gone wrong? Ask yourself that question. Because all the nice people you rejected because you wanted status and wealth and money and people like that. You know, funny thing in life though is that I've noticed is that a lot of people who've got status, wealth, power and stuff like that aren't that nice. It comes down to it. Because they've had to shove a lot of people out of the way to get to where they are. Not always. That's not. You shouldn't make a blanket assumption like that. There are people I've met who are pretty wealthy, who are nice people. But I've met a lot of people, and oddly enough, I've seen them when they had nothing, or they were struggling to get established or whatever. And at that time, they were quite decent people, you know, nice people and whatever. It tends to be men, to be quite honest, because men tend to be more driven and stuff. And I've seen them when they've got to be sort of struggling along, just making a living type of thing. Then all of a sudden they tap into something, they get, you know, and the business takes off. And in no time at all, they've made a lot of money. And they become absolute horrors of people. they become horrible, selfish, spiteful, mean, arrogant. Oh yeah, seen that. I've seen people completely change into a different personality once they've got money. Well, what I've always said is, if that's what having a lot of money does to you, I don't want it. Now, I'm somewhere where I like to be. I'm well off, but I'm not rich. And I don't flaunt the money I've got because that attracts the wrong people. I live quite a humble life, really. I don't flaunt money in front of people, even though I've got it. And to be honest, I don't go around telling people, shall we say, the extent of my personal situation. Because it does attract the wrong people if you do that. So I tend to like to look quite humble. I mean, people know that I'm fairly comfortable, but they don't know, like I said, the extent of where I am. Yeah. But and as I said, I do try to help people. I've often given money away. Every Christmas, for instance, for donkey's years now, I've banned anybody from buying me birthday presents and Christmas presents for one practical reason. I don't need anything. You know, I've got enough money, spare money knocking around. If I want anything, I just go and buy it. I don't have to check whether I can afford it or not, because I know I can afford it. You know, I have a modest car. I don't drive around in a big car or anything like that, saying, "Look at me, everybody! Look how successful I am." Because you look like an idiot, to be honest, if you people do that. It's not my thing. But like I say, I ban people from. I don't have a lot of close friends, and I've hardly any family now. But a few years ago, it was I got more of my family. A lot of them had passed away, unfortunately. But when I had a lot of family, more family than I've got now anyway, I used to tell people, don't buy me anything. Whatever you do not buy me anything for Christmas, right? And I had an agreement to do the same as what I do. I don't buy anybody anything anyway. Because everybody I know and my family and stuff, my remaining family, have all got money. They don't, none of them need anything. And I certainly don't. So every year, I just tot up what people, average thing that people are spending money. Every year you get on the media, don't you? Oh, this year the average family has spent this much on Christmas presents. And, you know, what I do, I'm always involved somewhere along the line with some kind of either a homeless shelter or a food bank or somebody. Some of them I've had a long association with. I was the director, for instance, of a homeless shelter a few years ago, and I still send money to them. And what I do is I look at how much money I would have spent on Christmas presents, and I just give it them. I usually give it to two different local charities, or particularly things for the homeless. And occasionally, I might hear about somebody who's struggling through no fault of their own. They've basically had a rough deal. And I'll make instructions through my lawyer to send them a cheque. Not from me, because obviously they didn't know who it was then, but via the lawyer. And that's my Christmas present. It's great because you don't have to queue. You're buying Christmas presents. You have to go and queue up in the stores, and everybody's pushing and shoving, get out of the way. And that was mine. You see these things where they're fighting over Christmas presents. I wonder what Jesus would have thought of that. If Jesus could come back now and have a look round and think, I could say he came to me and said, "Hey, Dennis, can you just take me around and show me what's going on?" And it's about Christmas time. Imagine it was Christmas time. You took Jesus into a department store and said, "This is people who are celebrating your birth." And there's people there pushing and shoving, pushing each other out of the way, and they want to buy stuff. It would be nice to think that people are buying stuff for their kids, because it's nice that the kids get something. I actually suspect that the reason they're doing it is so they can tell everybody how much they spent on the kids. It's that ego thing again, isn't it? you know. Oh, we spent so much on our little so-and-so this year. Aren't we good parents? Well, no. Maybe if you spent a bit more time with them, that'd be better. Instead of just shoving up in the room on a computer game. You know? Have you thought about doing that? Or just take them to the park for a kick around with football. Spend some time with them. How many kids do you see now? They never come out of their rooms. Just sat on computers and computer games. Yeah. Makes you wonder. But anyway, that's what I do every year. So I've no problems with the Christmas shopping, honouring that garbage. I just give money away. And that's my Christmas present done. And I think if Jesus was here now, I think Jesus would say, oh, yeah, that's more like it, Dennis. You don't need things, so don't ask people for them and don't accept them. You've got enough. Think about other people, particularly while you're celebrating the birth of Jesus, whose message to humanity was to love each other and care for each other. I don't remember him saying anything about queuing up to buying things in the sales. Correct me if you theologians want to correct me on this. Feel free to do so, but I don't actually remember anything about that. I must admit I'm not a deeply religious person, but I'm a spiritual person, a very spiritual person. And yeah, I'm only giving Jesus an example. I'm sure there are other prophets around who said more or less the same thing. You know, think about other people, the people who are sick, the people who are poor, who haven't got enough to eat, who haven't got a place to sleep. Think about them. And without getting political, perhaps we can think of some other people who should start thinking along those lines. Some of them have just had a conference. And strange thing is, just going into the conference, they've cut universal credit by £20 a week. Now, if I was suddenly appointed to lead this wonderful country that we have, and somebody said to me, Dennis, will you do that? I would say to them, no. And the next person who comes in my office suggesting it can find himself another job, because they're not going to be in my government. Hey mate, what about all these people who are using tax havens and stuff so they don't have to pay any tax? You know, these people who've got billions and they live in a tax haven and they come here, but they still use our economy to make money for themselves. What about them? Maybe they ought to pay a little bit. Funny enough, a couple of years ago, I actually wrote to the Prime Minister and suggested something, because I'm a businessman, you see, and I know about these things. And what I suggested was that the way to deal with these companies, particularly these big corporations that trade in the United Kingdom, but then register themselves in a tax haven so they don't have to pay any of our corporation taxes, the way to deal with them is to bring in a VAT levy for any company or corporation that is not registered in the United Kingdom. Because these corporations, doesn't matter if they're registered in a tax haven, they still have to pay VAT on all their sales arising out of their sales in the United Kingdom. So when people say these corporations don't pay any tax, actually they do pay tax. What they don't do is they don't pay corporation tax, which is the tax a company makes on its profits. But they do pay VAT, because you can't get out of that, because it's not where you're registered is irrelevant. Where you're registered doesn't matter. It's where you're trading that counts. So if you trade in the United Kingdom, you pay VAT on all your sales. And that's the way to trap them. All the Chancellor has to do is bring in a law that says that if you're not registered if you're a company and you're not registered in the United Kingdom, you pay a surcharge on your VAT. So some of these companies, their VAT bill will be absolute millions and millions every quarter, or 6 months or whatever it is that they pay these people, because they have different arrangements. So all the Chancellor has to do is bring this new tax in, new arrangement. You fill in your VAT return out, which is something I've done many, many times. It says company name and address, company registration number. If you haven't got a company registration number, it's a UK registration number, guess what? Whatever your tax is, add another 10%. Gotcha! Can't get out of it. You cannot get out of it. Right? You can go and register yourself in Timbuktu. Makes no odds. Because of the way that VAT is formulated. It's not where you're registered. It's where you're trading. So, all these companies that are hiding wherever and avoiding corporation tax, well, the old VAT net would come out and scoop them up. Because if their tax was 10 million, they'd have to pay another million if it was 10%, another £1 million on top of that as a non-UK company surcharge. Haha, gotcha. Can't get out of it. So they'd then have a little conundrum to do. What they could do is either pay that surcharge, depending on how much it was, or they could register a UK affiliate subsidiary in the United Kingdom. So then they'd pay corporation tax. Now I can tell you how big business works. Any business, right? They would get their little boffins to work it out. Are we better to register in the United Kingdom and pay corporation tax, or are we better to just leave it as it is and pay the VAT surcharge for non-UK companies? And they would just work it out. And they'd just do whatever they had to do. Because that's the way they work. They're pragmatic. And that's the way. Now, when I wrote to the Prime Minister, I didn't even get a reply. Now, to be fair to him, at the time we were still in the European Union. And of course, we weren't allowed to do anything like this because VAT rates have to be equal across the EU countries. But of course, we've left now, haven't we? So we can make up our own tax laws. And as far as I know, under international law, there's nothing to stop you from having a VAT surcharge on foreign companies trading in your country, in our case, the United Kingdom. This would be worth billions, possibly even trillions of pounds a year to get these corporations to pay what I would say a contribution to the infrastructure that they're benefiting from. They're trading within the UK, so they're using our economy to make money, but they're not paying anything back. Doing it this way, they'd have to pay. There's no escape from it. No escape whatever. Because, as I said to you before, VAT is payable where you traded, not where you registered. Now there's the thing. So I'd be doing something like that. And knocking 20% off the poorest people in the country, that would not be at the top of my agenda. Not 20%, £20 a week. No. What we'll do is we'll help the poorest people, right? And we'll go after the people who aren't paying their whack. That's what we'll do. So why aren't the government doing that? Well, it could be. I'm just saying, it could be. And it's not just the government. Let's say, why aren't politicians doing that? Politicians of any description. Why isn't... Listen, I'm not a genius. Yet I thought this one up. And I've written to the Prime Minister, told them, why isn't there somebody from the opposition standing up and saying, why isn't the Prime Minister doing this? Would the Prime Minister consider doing this? No. Why? Well, because they're all getting checks from the corporations, aren't they? The very people who are dodging the taxes. Because what these corporations do is they pay money to all the parties, not just the government. People think they pay money to whichever the ruling party is. No, they don't. They pay it to everybody. In elections, they'll often pay money into the funds, electoral funds, of both parties. You think, well, why do they do that? Well, simple. These people are pragmatic. They're not political, they're pragmatic. And what they know is, whoever gets in, they've paid them money. So they've got access to them. to have a whisper in their ear what they want doing. And they've also paid to the opposition. So when the government bring out legislation that suits the corporations, there won't be any opposition because they've paid both parties. As the penny just dropped, that's how they work, because they're pragmatic. Right? And this is the way that politics is corrupt. Because these corporations have got a bet on every horse in the race. So whichever one comes over the line first, they've won. That's how they work. And like I say, this is why nothing works, does it? Not now. There's no opposition to anything. Everybody's reading off the same script, aren't they? Opposition parties, all the fringe parties, all the same. They're all getting money from them. That's why things like this don't happen. Like I say, I'm not a genius. I'm quite sure loads of other people have thought this one out. I bet you any money there's loads and loads of little people like me who've written to the Prime Minister or the Chancellor saying, why don't you introduce a surcharge on VAT for non-UK companies? That's why they didn't reply to me. I didn't even get a standard Downing Street reply saying, oh, thank you for your letter. We've passed it on to the politician, to the Prime Minister, blah, blah, blah. I didn't even get that. Why? Because money talks. And those with most money talks loudest. I can tell you that because I'm a businessman. That's the way the world works. So, it's been a long one today. Sat here rambling for nearly an hour. So I'll let you get off now. And have a little think about what I've said if you would. Leave a few comments. Press the like button. The subscription button. And all the rest of the rubbish that you have to press nowadays. And hopefully, I'll see you again. Love to you all. Keep smiling.